In today's video, we are continuing our standard series, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the best red spells in March of the Machine, and talk about how they might impact decks going forward. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. If you do enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe. Click the bell icon if you want to stay notified. And as always, I do encourage you to leave comments down below. Let me know your own thoughts on these cards that we go over, whether or not you've played them, used them, etc. It's always just nice to interact and sort of see what people's thoughts are on other topics that we cover. So I'd just like to put that out there. Now, if you've been following our standard series, we've been talking about a lot of the general, some of the core, like, tier 1 standard decks, and I did a video covering mono red standard, just sort of the general outline for what the deck was seeing and what was being played. But as you know, there is a rotation that will be coming up later this year, so there may be some changes to the deck, and I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about some of the newest cards that were introduced that are already starting to find their way in. Today we're going to cover 5 cards, but there are definitely more, and obviously as we move forward with more sets coming out, there are going to be even more cards that start to see play. It's pretty obvious kind of how that works, but we don't have really too much from March of the Machine Aftermath from what I've seen so far that actually looks like it's going to make a real impact, and so for that reason we're going to mostly stick with what we've got from the original or regular March of the Machine. First up, we've got KHENRA SPELLSPEAR. This card is insane, and once you read it, you'll kind of figure out why. But if that doesn't do it for you, seeing it on paper and in practice will definitely help. KHENRA SPELLSPEAR is 1 in a red, and it has Trample and Prowess, meaning whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until the end of the turn. But here's the part that just makes this card a whole nother level. It is 3 and 1 Phyrexian mana, meaning you can either pay a blue or 2 life, transform KHENRA SPELLSPEAR, activate only as a sorcery. Once you transform it, it transforms into Gitaxian Spellstalker, which has some absolutely insane artwork just to throw out there. It is a Phyrexian Jackal 3/3 with Trample, Ward 2, and double Prowess, meaning each time you activate a non-creature spell, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This is a lot of power for a card that you can theoretically make live by turn 3, and that's just something that you should keep into consideration when looking at a faster format like Standard. It has Trample, Ward, and can just be a 5/5 beat stick just by resolving 1. If you're looking at mono red and you're playing low-cost spells like Play with Fire, or Kumano Faces Kakazan, or many of the other low-cost sort of 1 or 2 mana spells, it is not hard to buff this guy up and just swing for massive damage. And obviously your opponent, not only do they have to block it heavy because of Trample, but they also, if they want to target it with anything to out it, do have to be able to pay that mana. This card is really, really good. I think you're going to see it starting to show up in a lot more builds, and it's already seeing some representation in some of the online standard tournaments and events. So yeah, KHENRA SPELLSPEAR. For an uncommon, it's definitely decent, and I think it's going to be a pretty solid mainstay in mono red going forward. Next up, we've got BLOODFEATHER Phoenix. This is really interesting, and when it was first announced, I wasn't super high on it, no pun intended, just because it didn't seem like it was all that great in practice, but playing with it, you can definitely see why the card is useful. It is 1 in a red with flying, and it says BLOODFEATHER Phoenix can't block, much like Phoenix Chick, which is another solid card in mono red. It just seems to be a thematic thing for Phoenixes, maybe because they're made of fire, I don't know. But it says whenever an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage to an opponent or battle, you may pay 1 red mana. If you do, return BLOODFEATHER Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains haste until end of turn. The reason this card is actually really interesting is because there are a lot of ways to get it in graveyard within mono red, being able to discard it for certain costs, and then you can bring it back for just 1, and having haste means it basically can just add to your ability to swing for more damage. Now, if you're playing some kind of combo deck, or maybe like a more mid-range deck that's not just like mono red, like fast finish burn, you can combo this with cards like Fable of the Mirror Breaker, being able to discard and draw, and another new card we're going to talk about in a moment that explains sort of why this is just a really good option to have. But in general, being a low-cost flying that can revive itself is reason enough to look at this card as really good. Next up, we've got WRENN'S Resolve. This card is very similar to Reckless Impulse, which is a card already existent but will be rotating out. This is 1 in a red sorcery that says exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. One of the biggest things mono red has going for it that is kind of detrimental is the fact that resources are burned through very quickly. So with this card, you're able to exile. It's essentially like you're getting the 2 cards for free to play next turn. And because they're so low cost, in most situations, especially if you're a few turns into the game, you're going to be able to play this without a problem. So it will typically resolve. It is a good card and, of course, does combo with a lot of things. It's just one of those things where getting resource management is important, and when the deck does lose cards that are going to, you know, kind of need to be replaced, this will slot in very, very nicely for that. Next up, we've got Invasion of Regatha. So this is the first battle that we're kind of talking about for red, and this is 2 in a red battle, and of course it's the siege, which all battles that we have so far are. And it says, when it enters the battlefield, deal 4 damage to target battle or opponent, and 1 damage to up to 1 target creature. Now, 4 damage for 3 mana is not bad when you consider how quickly we can start to build up damage in this deck. Being able to take out a battle actually combos really well with copies of itself, and so let's say you have this, you know, one of these out already, you draw another one, you pop it, and then you swing over it with like a Swift Spear, you can then transform it into its other side. It does come back as Disciples of the Inferno, which is a 4/4 human monk with prowess, and it says if a non-creature source you control would deal damage to a creature, battle, or opponent, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. I don't think I really need to explain why this card is absolutely insane, because even something like Play with Fire is now going to do 4 damage for 1 mana instead, and if you play another copy of Invasion of Regatha, it's actually going to do 6 damage instead, so on and so forth, and that's before taking into consideration cards like Mechanized Warfare, which are already stacking damage. You can go for the kill really fast if you can get this out quickly, and that's obviously Mono Red's entire goal. The other battle card I wanted to mention is Invasion of Mercadia. This is 1 in a red, and it says when it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. Now, it's not necessarily as good as, like, Faithless Looting, which is obviously not standard legal. However, it's not bad as an option to sort of filter through your hand, especially when we now have Bloodfeather Phoenix, like I mentioned earlier, which basically allows you to revive itself, and you can kind of play that resource game a bit more easily. Invasion of Mercadia, when it transforms, comes out as Chiron Flameright, which has 2 in a red, tap, discard a card, create 2 1/1 blue and red elemental creature tokens, then creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. It's not bad necessarily, but it's not really the point in playing it, especially because you're almost never going to resolve that effect. Your creatures are most likely going to have haste already, but it's more so for the front side that we're playing this as a way to sort of fix our resources and get deeper into the deck. As far as ratios and how many copies you'd want to play, it's hard to say because it's just sort of so new and there hasn't been enough data out there just yet, but it's a card to keep in mind, and you can obviously see where it combos really well with things like Bloodfeather, so yeah, you probably want to utilize this in some capacity. And finally, in this video, we've got Rampaging Raptor. This costs 2 and 2 red. It's a dinosaur with trample and haste. It says pay 2 in a red. Rampaging Raptor gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Whenever Rampaging Raptor deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls or battle that player protects. So this will likely slot in as a replacement for Thundering Raiju, which will be cycling out, and it's just also a decent option in general. Being able to hit an opponent and then, you know, pop a battle allows you to combo with the other battles we just discussed, and it's just another decent option. It's just on that cusp, you know, it costs 4, it's not impossibly hard to bring out. It's not going to be your deck's, like, main focus by any stretch, but it's not going to be a bad card to have, especially because it can buff itself, so later in the game it can swing for more damage, and like I said, it does double its damage to, you know, take out problematic planeswalkers or battles, which will definitely become more prevalent as the format continues to shift. These are just some of the new cards that are going to be good for red and standard, and obviously there's a lot more and things we probably haven't even seen yet, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Have you been playing any of these if you are playing red, and did you think I missed any cards that were important to cover, or do you disagree that some of these are good? I mean, obviously this is just my opinion based on a little bit of research about what's seeing representation, but other people may have different takes on it, so I want to hear from you guys. Sound off in the comments down below, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.